What was that?
Everyone's been afraid of monsters under the bed at some point, right? But for one kid, it wasn't just a bedtime imagination thing. It was way too real. Picture this: an 8-year-old boy in a small, old house. The floors creaked like they had stories to tell, and the wallpaper had that faded floral pattern that screamed 1970s. Nighttime meant the same ritual every evening. He brushed his teeth, put his stuffed bear on the pillow, said goodnight to his parents, and climbed under the thin blanket that smelled faintly of laundry detergent. The light switch clicked off, and the house turned into that thin, tense, quiet kids learned to hate. At first, the noise was subtle, a slight inhale and exhale, a soft cadence like someone trying not to be heard. He told himself it was the furnace, maybe the pipes. Adults always had a convenient explanation for sounds that sounded like the night itself was breathing. But the sound kept happening, night after night. It was always close, too close, not in the hallway, not from the closet, from under the bed. What made him freeze was the rhythm. It matched his own breathing at first, then shifted. It grew slower, deliberate. The noise would start right after his parents walked down the hall and the door clicked shut. It would pulse once or twice, then stop. Sometimes it came with a whispering, not a clear sentence, not the kind of whisper you tell a friend about. It was a wet, sibilant mumble, like someone shifting sand through a mouth. The kid tried logic like a lifeline. He slept propped on his elbow, eyes wide, daring himself to be brave. He put the bear on the floor beside his bed and watched the shadows like they might move. He told his parents in the morning. They laughed awkwardly and said, "Kids have vivid imaginations." They checked under the bed and pulled out nothing but dust bunnies, a lost sock, and a Lego spaceship. They ruffled his hair and said, "It's fine, champ." But the laughing stopped somewhere between the hallway and the kitchen. The sound wouldn't leave him alone. One night, adrenaline and curiosity teamed up and bullied him into action. He waited until the house had settled, until the floorboards sighed and the radiator cooled. He slipped the blanket back without making a sound and leaned over the side of the bed. His heart hammered in a rhythm that felt louder than any whisper. He pulled the dust-covered dust ruffle aside and shone a flashlight, tiny and trembling, into the darkness. For a breathless second, he saw a face, pale like someone who'd been hiding from sunlight for a long time. The eyes were a little too wide, like someone surprised to be caught. The skin had an odd translucence that made the veins under the cheeks show faintly. The mouth was a shadow, but when it curved, it did not look like a normal smile. It was wrong in a way older people talk about when they want to make you feel safe. He screamed before he could think. The beam of the flashlight jumped. The thing under the bed was gone. His parents rushed in, faces full of confusion. They checked every inch of his room, the closet, behind the curtains, under the bed. Empty. He was a child hysterical with terror, words tumbling out that the adults didn't know how to hold. They offered explanations like warm blankets. Maybe he'd had a nightmare. Maybe he'd seen a reflection. Maybe it was a trick of the light. None of it fit the way his skin still felt on fire from fear. After that night, sleep became a foreign country. He demanded the hall light stay on. He dragged an extra pillow to keep his feet from hanging over the edge. He learned little rituals to feel safe. He would check the room 3 times before bed, counting under his breath.
He slept with the door closed, which made the air stand still and thick. He refused to take naps in the daytime because the light made monsters feel like they might hide more easily. Years later, as an adult, he tried to fold the memory into something reasonable. He read about sleep paralysis and hypnagogic hallucinations, those half-awake visions that can feel terrifyingly real. Maybe it had been that. Maybe a child's mind is just wired to make monsters out of shadows. But curiosity is a stubborn thing, and curiosity made him ask questions about the house he grew up in. He learned the property had a history. The previous owner was a loner, with rumors trailing after him. Neighbors spoke about odd smells, about doors left open at strange hours, about deliveries that no one remembered. Some whispered that the man had vanished without a trace. Others hinted at darker things. The more he dug, the more the edges of the story blurred between gossip and fact. Was the face under his bed a ghost? A trick of his brain? A grief for something he could not name? He still does not have a tidy answer. What he does have are lasting traces. Even now, he can describe the face with the kind of specificity adults lose as they grow older. He remembers the way the light hit the cheek and how absurdly close it felt. He remembers how his hands shook afterward. He admits to flinching whenever someone mentions basements or attics, like his body remembers the night before his mind has caught up. The real scar is small but stubborn. He cannot sleep with his feet dangling. He avoids motel rooms with visible space under the bed. He turns lights on in hotel rooms at night and checks corners reflexively. Some people collect souvenirs from places they visit. He collects habits that keep him from reliving that night. Habits that whisper back in the dark that he survived.
Don't go there!
Now, let's move to another childhood memory that has haunted someone for decades. And this one? It happened in broad daylight, which somehow makes it even creepier. Picture this. 6 years old, tiny sneakers kicked into the sand, sunlight warm on the back of your neck. The playground is a safe little universe, squeaky swings, a chorus of laughter, parents on benches pretending they're not watching too closely. That's exactly how she felt. She knew the park like the lines on her hand. She knew which swings squeaked the worst and where the best spots for hide and seek were. So when the voice came, it didn't fit the scene at all. She was on a swing, legs swinging on autopilot, when something soft and urgent brushed her ear. "Don't look behind you." The words were barely louder than a breath, but they carried a weight that stopped her mid-swing. Her body reacted before her brain did. She spun her head around so fast, her hair slapped her cheeks. No one, just empty space and a trash can with a dent in it. A bird landed on the top bar and hopped away like it hadn't heard anything. She told herself it was imagination. Kids make up spooky stuff all the time. Maybe another kid was playing a prank. Maybe she'd just been daydreaming. But then it happened again. Another whisper, the same tone, the same hush. "Don't go home." This one didn't feel like a joke. It felt like someone trying to shove truth into her ear without anyone else catching on. She froze, a knot forming in her stomach, because it sounded like a warning, not a tease. Over the following weeks, the whispers became a pattern. They didn't happen everywhere, only at the playground, only when she was alone or thinking she was alone. She'd climb the jungle gym and feel a cold breath against her ear. He's coming. She'd slide down, and right before she landed, a voice would hiss, "Run." Sometimes it called her by name, and the familiarity of that small betrayal made her chest tighten. It wasn't threatening in a shout, more like an urgent suggestion from a stranger who suddenly cared too much. Her parents thought she was inventing stories. Teachers wrote it off as attention-seeking or an active imagination. Kids whispered about ghost voices like it was a trend. She tried to explain, but the words never sounded convincing when adults wanted to file them under cute or creative. The playground still looked the same, double swings, a slide that glinted in the sun, but the air had changed for her. It held a static buzz of possibility, the kind that makes your skin prickle. Then the day came when something happened that couldn't be shrugged away. She ran home screaming, cheeks wet from crying, insisting she'd seen a man watching her near the swings. He wasn't close enough to touch, she said. He just stood there, hunched at the edge of the park, hands shoved deep in his pockets, eyes on the kids. Her dad sprinted back with her, heart pounding, but by the time they reached the spot, there was no one. Footprints could be found, or maybe just the impression of someone's passing. Hard to tell. Still, that night, other parents started mentioning a strange man who'd been loitering near the playground. A handful of neighbors described the same posture, the same blank stare. Weeks later, the police arrested a man connected to reports from multiple parks. He was linked to suspicious behavior around children. No violent acts reported publicly, but enough to make neighbors uneasy. News articles ran for a day, then moved on. She followed the story with the intensity only someone who felt directly addressed by a siren could. When the details emerged, pieces of her whispers clicked into place like a puzzle finishing itself. Was the voice inside her a warning? A psychic alarm that only she could hear? Or was it her intuition prickling in the right place at the right time? Now, in her 20s, that playground memory sits like a stone in her shoe. Small, but impossible to ignore. She avoids swings when she can. Babysitting requests near parks make her stomach hollow. And every time she hears the creak of a swing, the old whisper flits through her head. Don't look behind you. It's not loud, it's not dramatic, but it's enough to remind her that sometimes the world drops tiny breadcrumbs in your direction when danger is near, and sometimes all it takes to follow them is listening. This last one is a little different. Honestly, it might be the creepiest of them all. It's not loud. It doesn't scream. It simply folds into your memory in a way that never quite fits. And that's what makes it so unsettling. When he tells the story, he starts the same way every time. 7 years old, sticky fingers from jam sandwiches, sneakers scuffed from running, visiting his grandmother's house. You know the type of house, big, lumbering, built long before anyone thought about open floor plans. It smelled like dust and old paper and sewing thread. The stairs creaked in places you could map with your feet. Hallways split into smaller hallways. Doors led to doors like a maze designed by someone who loved secrets. He had been there so often that he could walk the layout blindfolded. He knew where the sun pooled on the kitchen tiles in the afternoon. He knew which chair in the parlor sunk a centimeter if you sat too long. So when he says he found a door that had never been there before, people listen. That kind of place doesn't usually add new parts overnight. They were playing hide and seek, cousins scattered like confetti through the rooms. He hugged the wall, counting, then sprinted down a long corridor he'd run 100 times. Between two familiar doors, there was a thin crack of wood, painted the same faded white. He stopped dead. The door was narrow and weathered, the kind that looked as if it had been closed for decades. It wasn't on the floor plan that lived in his head. It shouldn't have been there. Curiosity, that loud, honest itch, pushed him to open it. The knob turned with a sigh. The room inside was small and dim. The wallpaper peeled in long ribbons, floral, faded to almost patternless beige. A single bed sat pressed against the wall, covered in a quilt that smelled like cedar. In the corner, a wooden rocking chair creaked on its own, back and forth in a slow, steady rhythm. And in that chair sat an old woman, not his grandmother, not anyone he knew. Her hair was white and braided into a crown that sat close to her skull. Her hands lay folded in her lap. Her eyes looked straight at him, but they weren't sleepy or dull. They were unnervingly alert, as if she were reading the edges of things the way other people read books. She did not speak. She did not blink in the way eyes normally blink. She simply watched him, rocked, watched. The air felt cold in there, like the room held a second winter the rest of the house did not. He remembers the chill sliding up his legs. He remembers the smell of fabric dye and old skin. His legs felt glued to the floorboards. He was so frozen, he forgot what hiding meant. Then, distant and ordinary, his cousins' voices called his name. It was that sound that broke whatever bubble the room had been. He turned his head toward the hallway where the shout had come from. For a single second, the safety of the rest of the house was visible. The wallpaper he knew, the hallway he knew, the light he knew. He looked back. The room was gone. The narrow door that had been there a breath before was now a blank swath of wall. He had not just stood there. He might have thought he'd imagined the whole thing. For years, he told himself a sleep-deprived brain made up a movie. He told himself children's minds stitched together fragments into whole scenes. He told himself the rocking chair was a memory from a movie or an old lady from town. But memory is tricky. It is not a photograph you can return to the cheap store to reprint. It is a rumor that grows more precise the more you tell it. Years later, at a family reunion, an aunt laughed and said, almost offhand, "Do you remember that extra room in Grandma's house?" He froze. The same phrase, the same place. She remembered finding a narrow door as a child. She remembered a chair that rocked by itself. She remembered turning away to call her brothers and returning to find nothing. Other relatives began to nod. Some claimed an uncle had once described a doorway that led to nowhere. Another cousin added that when she peeked, as a teen, the room smelled like a church. Each story had the same central thing, an impossible room that appeared and vanished. When multiple people who grew up in the same house share the same impossible snapshot, it turns the story from a private oddity into something communal and uncanny. They started to trade details. Small consistencies emerged. The chair always rocking, the woman always watching,
the way the room felt colder than the rest of the house. No one could agree on why. No one could pin it down to a prank, a draft, or a trick of the light. He tried to research. Old property records, whispered stories from neighbors, photographs with faces blurred by time. Nothing definitive. The house's blueprints did not include an extra room. If there had been a small servant's room or a sealed storeroom, it had been erased from official memory. Local papers held nothing that matched the story. The past closed like a fist whenever he tried to pry it open. The memory lodged inside him like a splinter. It didn't hurt all the time, but it was always there, an irritation you notice the moment you sit down. He stopped visiting the house often. Family gatherings grew strained. He told himself it was about avoiding awkward reunions, but when he admitted the truth, he said it was because he could not bear the idea of stumbling into that doorway again. The thought of the old woman's eyes, alive in the way eyes are when they have watched you across decades, was enough to keep him away. Now, when he talks about that day, he does not try to explain what the room was. He offers possibilities instead, memories that cross paths, a shared psychological echo, a place where grief or loneliness pooled and took shape for a moment. He leaves the real explanation open, like a door cracked slightly ajar. And on the rare nights he allows himself to imagine the house in his head, the rocking chair moves back and forth, slow as a heartbeat, waiting for the light to fall in a certain way so it can appear again. He prefers to keep the door closed.
So, those were 3 disturbing childhood memories that still haunt the people who experienced them. What makes them so chilling is how real they felt, and how much they've stayed with them into adulthood. Whether it's a face hiding under the bed, a whisper on the playground, or a room that shouldn't even exist, these stories remind us that sometimes the scariest moments don't come from movies or ghost stories. They come from our own memories. And the worst part? They often happen when we're young, when no one believes us, and when we don't have the words to explain what we saw or felt. Think about it. Childhood is supposed to be safe. Bedrooms are supposed to be cozy. Playgrounds are supposed to be fun. And Grandma's house is supposed to be warm and familiar. But for some people, those places turned into the backdrop of experiences they'll never forget. Imagine being a kid, trying to sleep, but hearing breathing that isn't yours, or swinging happily in the sunlight, only to feel someone whisper in your ear, or running through a hallway you thought you knew, only to find a door that leads somewhere impossible. These aren't just random scary thoughts, they're memories burned into people's minds for decades. And here's the thing. Most of us have at least one moment from our childhood that doesn't sit right. A shadow that moved when it shouldn't have, a voice when no one was there, a place in the house you never wanted to go alone. Maybe you brushed it off as imagination, or maybe, like the people in these stories, it stayed with you. The question is, what do you do with a memory like that? Do you try to forget it, or do you accept it as something that can't be explained? Now, I want to hear from you. Do you have a creepy memory from your childhood that you've never been able to explain? Something that still makes you shiver when you think about it, even years later? If you do, share it with us. Send it to the email in the description.
We're always looking for real stories to feature in future videos. And trust me, you don't want to miss what's coming next. Thanks for watching, stay safe, and I'll see you in the next video.